So we start with mandala offering, and then correct the motivation with refuge and bodhicitta. Sa shi ploki jo shi me to ra re shi ni de gen pa di sangye shindu mi te o girdo ko namda shin la chu pa shoi dang guru rana mandala gambiya daya
Sanji
Cholan
Chetan
zogi
Sojin
chonam la
Chomula
chanchu badu dani kyasuchi dagi chushegi betonangi rola penchi sangi rupa sho
Sanji
Cholan
Chetan
zogi
Sojin
chonam la
Chomula
chanchu badu dani kyasuchi dagi
Dagi
chushegi
Chushigi Ben
betonangi
Sonungi
rola
Rolam
penchi sangi
Sanji
rupa
Drupara
sho
Sho Sanji
Chonan
Chetan
sogi
Sojin
chonam la
Chomula
chanchu badu dani
Kyabsu
kyasuchi
Dagi
dagi
Chushigi
chushegi
Ben
betonangi
Sonungi
rola
Rolam
penchi sangi
Sanji
dropa
Drupara
sho
Sho 강기 도전이 존에 따와 탐제 방비처럼 담비 춘든지 관담 계라 창세로 Good morning everyone. 참 잠깐 직관도 난 참반지
Perché tomanila tatanila chawani di mendo
라
toktanila chawani di marba ya men nyansul langwa lawar lap
nga불로 좀 글랍자는 템발에 니세지다 텐트서
di rotsare ches mani vaina chira dro mare te peshe tikche chignis chela tomanila totanila chawani di jela nyansul langwa lawaja
충전증이 아니 야
peshe di rotsare sare rotsare
그렇다 개만도 찔러선지
음
nga불로 좀 글랍자는 템발에 니 당한 참네마 로존님에서 참되니마 아니 항상 치카시지 로그인스로 로존 글랍자는 템발에 니 텐션좀 치지기 때문에 nen저 통지 찍기차 시송데 세근의 강쫄름 소지 nen저 탐절한 dim바시기 선비 졸은 내된 차오 통단이라 잡아니 셔바는 지수 소유발도 통말 멜니 당위세 펜비도 기cấp 셔바들 뻔히 지철 공민지 펜바 자도 당시 생기 튼 발발한 야위세 릉하기 저번 펜바신들 줄도나 단주길이 탑 티진기 최단 점 기위신이 지수의 된총 레그념도 좀 가와만도 차 펜바신만 좀 단주 추수주 추사모든 잡아 되면도 잡아 말레 진지 대들만 짜오님도 펜버 차오 냠 술랑을 랍 제반의 생기 동을 렌지랑게 대기 시험을 동안 까오냐나 다다 삼번 바시 그거는 다들 좀 공부를 두키지 돈을 무슨 주고 뭐가 위치로스 대바린 로세스
So, good morning. We've been looking at mind training like the rays of the sun, which is a text for training a mind. And in the previous session, we started to look at the section that is called the precepts of mind training. So we read a couple of points from that section. So Geshe will just read through them again, and then we'll pick up on the point that we left off in the previous session. So it says, first off, the precepts of mind training has two parts: the explanation of what appears in the text in the text and what appears in the text in maxims. Sorry, what appears in the text in verse and what appears in the text in maxims. Now, first off, explanation of what appears in the text in verse begins with every yoga should be performed as one. So this is a line that is taken from the 7-point mind training, the root text for mind training like the rays of the sun. And it says, ensure that all yogas of all such activities as eating, dressing, and residing are assimilated into a single practice of training the mind. So we've spoken of those points in the previous session. Geshe just is reading through what we have already spoke of. So then it says there are two activities at both beginning and end. Just as explained above concerning the power of intention, you should set a strong resolve to eliminate unwholesome activities and acquire their antidotes. You should do this when you wake every morning throughout your life. When you go to sleep at night, if you find that the behavior of your body and speech has been in accord with your resolve, you can rejoice, thinking that you're having found life as a free and fortunate human being met with the teachings of the great vehicle, and come under the care of spiritual masters have been worthwhile. But if you have not done as you have resolved, reflecting that you have worthlessly wasted your leisures and opportunities, and that your meeting with the profound teachings has been without purpose, determine not to do the same in the future. So this is what we've covered in the previous session.
Tadire dinza dinamala ya domroji gyarna tongda nila chawani seti tomi kolongda ani tami gita chuzik tonda shena ngowa sengi dirwas ra tadi chawa kandis cheba ina ya ra pigita tendengi chawa ra tendengi chawa tachi gensen jingi chawa chiondi kolong sambu chikoya ti kechembore 아니 타마들이야 자와들 르르디게 가와 공기 요거야 지금 가와 공기 요거 총바이나 아니 소시 자와다 야부지 제투위비 땅신지랜다 다 가와 공비 깔이야 학돈도 지 가와 공시네 아니 웅어와 지야디 먼저 감도 대보 침비 취시면서 심전 탐지 된도 오고야 되다 아니 기체슈리스 다디 견댕 자와도 저랑한다 아니 대린 제 산이 맞에 샤세 딘디 매바 다 간지 아니 깨는 맛이 봐도 제거야지 간지 아니 간주 코와를 깨네 로 다른 무시하나 코와를 깨네 상마게 봐도 샤와디 제거야지 어디리지랜도 왔으라
This section of the text that we've just read through that says there are two activities at both beginning and end. It refers to, first off, at the beginning, whatever we do, we first off set our intention, correct the motivation. And at the end, we use some words. We develop a joyous state of mind for having done so. And then we dedicate whatever virtue we have accumulated. So whatever we do, in order for whatever we do to become meaningful, first off, we want to correct our motivation. And then at the end, to dedicate whatever virtuous purpose we've accomplished for certain goals. And this is a really important part of our practice. So at the end, when we think of the activities that we have done motivated by a virtuous intention, we rejoice in them. And that, you can say, would be the mark of a positive activity. So particularly here, when we rejoice in the activity or the activities that we have done, we dedicate them using certain words for the welfare of all sentient beings. So it's important to develop the practice regularly, day in and day out, rather than doing it sometimes. Today doing it and tomorrow not doing it. Then the following day picking it up again, rather than being haphazard about it. It's important to do it continuously, not only so long as we live, but when we think of, first of all, the amount of time that we go through the cycles of existence. We want to do it for as long as we're in samsara, until samsara comes to its finality, but even more than that, until we attain the state of Buddha, until we attain our own Buddhahood.
당가 계절 중에 됐을 용거라서 당간들이야 지 기시도 지금 민치 아니 최시건자 아니면 가시 당이 냠는 가르치는 이야기를 아니 가르장는 이야기를 로지 아니 디니 파지 따잖아 cam도 야부 식사야리 아니 대지 돌아 상당야리 아딘지 또 견댕이 제거야지 로 견댕이 제거야지 따 소수 디장요레다 밀라다 무유 딜라베로스 다 딜라원디 메카시기 아니 돈라 카시지 다와 카시지라야 드리로지 아니 다 딩이 가는 거 체인다 셴바지 가르치고서 즉 제보기야 로 아니 디바 샤니 아니 양게 싸바지 지야도지 아니 딘디 카시기 딘디 로로 코딩이 카시가 투글도스라도 두조 직전에 그냥 디기니 코드 톡시그리 Ni samna da dusu nor deshas. Manzu kyamru gomyati, kyamru saltavyati, sam magi bhardu. Sam magi bhardu, ani kyamru laya, lawins, kyamru ani chegins, damja chego grada. Nza sam magi bhardu chejeres. Ani denshi ki nyamne dojimana. Sam magi bhardu. Manzu denshi nyamne chene, sangi gore modo. denshi ki nesul de shajen shembaji ki toni cheji zawa ni meba da dele kanne gel chogre susu lu chobayna bi jamju tolaya denshi tolaya da chi teba chimbi bi janju ki semda tinjile soba ro ani nyamne teneji sang doji tibi chushingi jina teneji dakele soba gomya o dinji tsuni digalaya nembe gyaptubayna digor modo di shani shembaji chigin sambayna 내가 마시비 딱 맞도 텔레에 겐센치 싸우니 요 말했어. 내가 좀 매도로 주표에는 니만 지워지 않고 콜레 겐센요랬어. 내가 좀 매도 표야디 비긴 제비 쳐봐. 그러 제비 쳐봐인자. 그 님바 차온 제부 메바 차온 란싱 제부 자고 왔다디. 쳐드 디레먼도 asro. 쳐드 디레먼도 페나 메난싱. 그러 페나 간주 시다 균댕기로 견댕 맨 사고야 된디 나자딘의 연구도 하다 디 맨디 샤바이나 자원이는 지금보다 페나 맨단 드라마들 페나 샘감기 비기다 지수 원실에 땜비기다 샘감을 된디기 샘감기 아니 맨든디 사고이다 릭든디 연구하다 소 아니 그 독자스게 말해왔어 디주 샤바이나 강한테 냐시르도스티 민투니 약부지 세치네 안 디간라야 루종치 디간라야 냠네치 로종치 드로바이나 야시게다면 펜도도 디난싱기 최디 겸로다 덴실로 소보디 난수 네단자위 뉴무 독섬 시야기 메시지 간살 된 거에게 멘로지 레샤스로
Sometimes people approach Geshe and ask for personal advice. And now Geshe is here as the Geshe, got the title Geshe. Here his role is to teach the Dharma. So they approach him with some questions, like, what should I study? What is it that I need to practice? And Geshe often says, well, in terms of what you study and practice, then you need to cover the topic of refuge and also to go deeper into the Four Truths. And you need to do it regularly. So Geshe gives the advice, and then it happens that sometimes people come back after a few weeks or after a few months, and they say that, well, I've done it, right? So I've studied refuge, and I've gone for refuge for a few months, and then I've done also kind of the Four Truths. So what's next? Give me something else. What's next? Give me something to recite. Maybe mantras and so forth. And Geshe reckons that maybe this attitude comes from having conversation between us and thinking that there is a mode of progression in which once you cover topics such as refuge and the four truths, then you need to leave it and then do something else. So kind of you've done it, you've covered it, you can now set it aside and do something else. But this is a mistake. So in terms of our mode of progression, we go for refuge until we attain the state of Buddhahood. We continue to train, we continue to practice. We do the same also with respect to the four truths. So there is no like a point where we set it aside. We have done that, we've covered that, so it would be time for us to move on. The practice of the four truths continues up until we attain the state of enlightenment. So if we think that at some point there will come a time for us to discontinue the practice based on the four truths, so that we can set it aside, it will render our practice to be inefficient, without meaning and so forth. So there's no point in doing that. It's different to, for example, flowers, right? So you offer flowers and you change them from time to time. When you arrange flowers, at least in this context, we make offerings of flowers, and when they wither, when they become old, we change them. But with the Dharma, it's not like that. Dharma is like medicine that we take regularly. So if you have a certain condition which requires you to take medication regularly, it's not that there is a time where you can just decide to stop to take your medication. So, and also, if you stop taking your medication, your situation can get worse. So this is not the right approach. Like, for example, some of us require to take some medication for certain mental conditions. So you do that, and then on that basis, you can also take care of your body. You can also continue with your study and practice and so forth. So this is kind of a balanced approach to taking treatment. So physical treatment, mental treatment, but particularly from a Dhamma perspective, we think that our sickness from a Dhamma perspective is afflictive states of mind. Anger, attachment, and ignorance. And for that, we need to apply consistent treatment, consistent medicine, and the medicine is the Dharma.
Tangor said, Manzulaya Tanda Je Kontambas, Lamata Samji Mikevaja, Kongi Lavjana Lolaya Dissoyota Tengi Kebu Tsik Kavala Tengris, Manzule Tamboa, and it's sick chigmena, Tanda the Sivuji Chartu Bekavareta, the Kibi Song Tab Devo Ben Union. 아니 된단 상부 된지기 아니 시그리 주치니 아니 디기 된 상당인데 배답되고요레스 그죠 배답되고 배는 소소로진 바이나 라브산 되다 배는 게 쇼기 딱봐 가야 랑바등이 강기 투진이 존이 따와 탐지 밤비시 담비 춘 된지비 고dom텔라 창zel로세 시그디등이 참이 교고였으로 니마 당보 배는 겨울무치기 송주 텐들이야 송 디지 아니 된다스키 그거 말다 직 아니베 토마 송주시디 담부 단계시와는 직베 라차부치야 로치 딘디 소녀요스 이난 타마도 상당데디기 아니 고물루르다 상기기 템번 징잉기다 아니 상기기 진주구나기다 세부터 고물루르 차도스 고물루르기 자와시르세 땡주 케번파비 땡주도 송디 이 통말 아니 처버지비 추주고 숑 처버져서디 템버산지 좀 되는 데라야 처버져잡아 템버산지 처버져라야 체드디야 아니 직 템버산지 좀 된 뒤에 탑시기 추님부터 아니 랑기 냠술네 디 똑바신지 몰라봐 랑귤러 총디 똑기 아니 셴라야 아니 신지 몰라봐 땡잡아 디 토니 아니 템발이야 아니 쳐버지 식지래도 왔어 배마서 약보 그러 강기 투진이 따와던 방 간지 탑식이 취니기 토네 아니 숨전래 취tem비 템바 캬버 진진바디 아니 존디 땡거 더 딘티지 땡지 디 텐다 성로 땅바이나 아니 템바 약슈디 딘린 줍줍도 왔어
So then, as the text says here, looking at the text again, it says, just as explained above concerning the power of intention, you should set a strong resolve to eliminate unwholesome activities and acquire their antidotes. You should do this when you wake every morning throughout your life. So first off, we wake up in the morning. We set this strong intentionality in the morning. We set this strong intention, and Geshe said that there's a really good advice that is found in the writings of Je Kuntamba, one of the great masters of the past. And Je Kuntamba said that when you set your intention, it's good to combine it with certain recitations. So you have those verses or those texts that contain really meaningful advice, meaningful instructions, but also very succinctly. So for us as beginners, sometimes it's really difficult to do that just by ourselves on our own accord. So if we have something that we can use, a verse or a certain text that is short, but also contains a lot of meaning, very kind of powerful meaning, this is something that is good to use. So for example, Geshe said that as he wakes up every morning, he recites a verse that is taken from Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise on the middle way called Wisdom. And this verse says, is paying homage to Gautama Buddha. It says that I pay homage to Gautama Buddha, the one that has severed all wrong views, or eliminated all wrong views, and motivated by compassion, taught it to others. So Geshe does that every morning without a break, without interruption. He actually started doing that way back when he was listening to instructions or to teachings that came from his Holiness the Dalai Lama. So Geshe has to be honest in saying that actually at the time when he had it, kind of his understanding of the Dhamma was pretty basic. He didn't know much, but kind of he thought that this is something that is good to pick up. It was kind of, he said that kind of, you just kind of pretend or act as if you know how to do it, so you start doing it. But then kind of over the years when he continued with his studies and went into the meaning of great texts, such as this text that was composed by Nagarjuna, the fundamental treatise on the middle way called Wisdom, which introduces this verse at the beginning of the text. And speaking in kind of in praising the Buddha, first of all, being motivated by compassion, teaching to others what he has done in eliminating erroneous conceptions, misconceptions. So he practiced the Dhamma. He developed an insight into reality, and then he taught it to others. So when you think of the meaning of this verse, it's so wholesome. So Geshe in his studies had to rely upon such texts that came from masters of the past. So really when you use those texts and you extract those pithy verses and instructions, you can use them in order to set a very strong but also your best intention for the day.
Just the trouble. 가되게
대박이나. 샤파.
샤바임베. 아. 너무 야야 배야. 야야. 건강 기주시.
Yeah, so we have some visitors from Nepal, Sherpa people, and they, this lady said that she comes from the same area, same place, same country as Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche.
먼저 nga 체니 스라 체기네 로종로 제 담아기 시죠 지 테네 라마서로 지기 간델레 얘기나 아니 난주 기긴치 로나 야고도 참모야고 바고도 소한상 간델레 살로 기에서 진로로 지기도 세닝이 될야 난주 지 데스모토도 진디기스
Geshe studied at Seraje Monastery, completed his studies as a Geshe, and upon the completion of Geshe studies, after that, after some time, he met with Gyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche, and Gyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche had a divination and more, and told Geshe that it'd be good for him to introduce the teachings, to give Dhamma teachings in places like that. So that was more than 8 years ago, and Geshe has been here for almost 8 years, giving Buddhist teachings.
세랄이야 샤르바기 라마 게시 and Tawatin di Mambuera Serchela.
There are many lamas, geshes, monks, there are sharpas, sherpas at Seraje Monastery.
Yeah, Disney get on the Dinyamdo the Mezeganza Lojon Chesa di Zozo Din Jangolam Tunga Chimbi, Sompo the Chevi, Shilla Shach in Lojon Chevanza, and Jangolam Tunga Chimboleta, dot may be Teba, dot may be Tebachi, the Yoris, Tinza Namgu and Sunday Mixima. Dangayoras, in a those and a Germachic song Nanola, Geondi, and a Yongdala, Sunday Mixamata, Germachiranga song race. In Dandi, and a Randa was Shonal Lodrig, Germachilla, Tuba, as a Germachi, Randa was Shonal Lodria, and a Mimets of the Jiris of Chimijimon, was not a cousin, John Lodrisha, so and their sag, 60 Tsukaguba race, Tsukaguba, or the Digi Songoras. In a Germanic song, most of the song on ya, and it's Corum Taran Roger Gemedos, right? Chimin can be Ombujambi and Simitz teaching Chiris, Double Malin Jones the Samyata, Kanchin Kibi, Sugan and our Jonolo Rishalo, so on the Tande Pomadaji down to source, just son Rochise, but Dindota, but dig 60 Gurchinta, and Chimin can be Ombujambia, Simitz teaching Chiris. Double Malin Jones the Samyata, Kanchin can be Sugin Sunkaba. Los Angeles so on the Tande Pomada and the source said that the Yajagatama Jeremic song Redishas is a dingy journey and it Kanji Shogi Tommy Kolondoti and the song dingy Tony Susu Kolon Kazu Jutuchi and a Judegius Rodi Nimataba and a Katsusi Gyurum Chetu and a Titsugi Samnalaya. Tembu Rojada, Limburo Yoya, things a Gundengi, Gundengi Yamnendi, Gundengi Chebaina, and the Gasha Gadam assembling Yotan to each, the Yosara Samson Roch, Nisem Yodos, the Lagmedina, Yosara Samson Roch, so shook chamber years. Mado Jewu Gavchin, Comdi Matemaji, Jewigan Rodevina, and a Pentoya, Chug, Tony, Semley, and Yotan. Comdi rang Tony Chitang Matuana. Shan Kabu showing service, Chenlab saying Kabu show Juya.
Tamadila, the Sikh Tamadila Kare, the
Temenkim Mujambia. Semitsi with the Chinchini. Tandu Pondaji down source. Tandu Susutta Town de Vicura. And in Nga Yonrochis.
So then Geshe studied in his life the 18 volumes of teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa. So what Geshe studied throughout his life, everything is based on those writings contained in those 18 volumes of teachings of Rinpoche Lama Tsongkhapa. So Geshe has irreversible, unshakable faith in the writings of Lama Tsongkhapa. So one of the verses of supplication that is associated with Jerimpoche Lama Tsongkhapa is the Mixima Verse. Do I close the file? I have. I'll open it again. There it is. So sorry. So the Mixima Verse. Now, this verse was composed by Lama Tsongkhapa himself, and Lama Tsongkhapa composed it in relation to his teacher, Jetsun Redawa Shunu Lodru. But then his teacher, Rendawa Shunu Lodru, has changed the verse and pointed it back to Lama Tsongkhapa. So it says, Mimetsewa Techichen Rezi, Jimmy Kimbe Wambo Jambian, Dubu Malajum Sanwada, Kanchin Gibitunga Tsungapa, Losandra Pishavla Sawade, Babalukitashvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, lord of secrets, destroyer of the entire host of mothers, Tsongkhapa, crown ornament of the sages of the land of snow, Losandrakpa, at your feet I make request. So what Rendawa did was he took the verse that was composed by Jerimpoche Lama Tsongkhapa and changed it back to Lama Tsongkhapa himself. So Lama Tsongkhapa wrote this verse with, the order of the lines was slightly different. So first of all, he addressed, instead of first of all addressing Avalokiteshvara Chinbrezi, he addressed first of all Manjushri. So the first line was Jeme Kembe Wambo Jampe Yang, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, then Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, then Lord of secrets, destroyer of the entire host of mothers. That's a reference to Vajrapani. And then it says, to Rendawa Shunu Lodru, at your feet I bow down, or at your feet I make requests. So as we said, Jason Rendawa changed it and pointed it back to Lama Tsongkhapa. The last line in this verse is also asking to be taken care of by the spiritual master, by the person who is seeking the state of liberation. So saying that, for example, I, when seeking the state of liberation, or wants to be liberated, is asking you to please take care of me. So Geshe is using this verse also in his daily recitations and practice. And it is a verse that contains a lot of meaning. And if we think of the meaning that is encapsulated by this verse, and then apply it to a continuous and consistent practice throughout the life, it would ensure that whatever we do on a daily basis in our life, in terms of our practice, will contain a great meaning. This is actually what we need to be practicing throughout our life.
Tirdiza bena lamin enjur sengidi, lamin enjur ti ani kending chegoya chikwa, ani nyamlen kanda jichile chebayna ya, thomar kyamro dan lamin enjur ti, lamin enjur lamgi sos lawenza, ngebar chegoya jirendas. Tirdiza ti ani kasota, zu di benatan janggolama tsungaba chimbolo ya, zu tengi jimban, janggolama tsungaba chimbi lamin enjur. Lebirumuchile thing, Lebirumuchi Pigita, Laminanjo, Tinguras, Tinti, Gundingiro, Gunding Chego Redomato, and in Negojila Cheni, and Jivakaji, sounding the Remendos.
And also in terms of our practice, we also regularly do a practice of Guru Yoga, which is really important. It is considered to be the life of the path, the Guru Yoga practice. So if you rely mainly on Lama Tsongkhapa, then you go for refuge, and you also do Guru Yoga. So these two elements, refuge and Guru Yoga, this is the life of the path. So if you rely upon Lama Tsongkhapa, then you regularly practice that. If you rely upon other lamas, Guru Rinpoche and such, then you also need to regularly practice the Guru Yoga of those teachers without becoming fickle in the practice, in that without changing it every once in a while. Do it consistently.
네, 타마들은 디나몰이야. 베나다 동nen세티. 랑 비게 랑 야바토니 신집은 준비 상로 태양 아니 통망가서 두스테온디기 용 미시비소르치 용야 깔락하고 슈치 여대바 태양 아니 공지 땜바이나 아니 공용디 아니 무슨 주고 메가비체로스라 어디다 공지 때마디 다 공지 로얄이야 균 싱고그라스라 완전 이마치 추적하시지래야 상무단이 로리야 공지 로야 빼마서 가보라다.
Then after that, it says, train first in the easier practices. And it reads, if you feel that it is difficult to take on the miseries of others and to give away your own happiness and merits, recall that at the present, you're training in these practices only on the mental level. When, due to acquaintance, you have gained prowess, actually engaging in virtue and taking will not be difficult. So here it refers to a practice of giving and taking, which is not an easy practice. It is a difficult practice, particularly when you think of putting it into practice in actual sense, actually taking from others and giving them your happiness or well-being. So here it says that first off, you need to adopt a gradual approach to your study, to your practice. So when you practice it initially, practice such as giving and taking, you're taking it first of all to be a mental practice, something that you do on a mental level. And what you need to do at the beginning, what we need to do at the beginning is to develop familiarity with the practice. And it is difficult to form those habits at the beginning. We can see that based upon a personal experience, in that when we approach practices like that initially, without having developed habits in practicing in this way, it becomes really difficult. But we take it as a mental practice on a mental level to begin with, and gradually we become more accustomed to it.
이번 간종 서버 제시비 셰반네 류성기 때도 대둑지 종양 갱인 남규지 값 셰바들 장출 주비기 조수 교वर 차오스.
And so next it says, whichever occurs, be patient with both. Whatever happiness or suffering befalls the body and mind, as was explained in the context of transforming adverse conditions into the path, you should transform it into a factor conducive to accomplishing enlightenment.
derda gengin lamgyu jikapsu kari sungori slaondigi nanzole ye gengin ba kari na tesigorasra kyo tomo me lengin bu mabu shuchi saba inza ani di jebu di nanzuta diksha maji bardı shagdam tsujin do maji bardı ko jebu yons nge baroji chade inza nanzugi lusem gu tole ya kadu mabu tesig bajires da di tebi kabdula ya 아니 체비 갑둘이야 가시 상로 담마시디 아니 로심바 이문바 아니 지 나수기나 체르드에 딘지 상담마시디 용구여라스 다 상담 신인지 임바이나 데 딘지기 동아디 참만티바디 나랑기 깨운 후만노스 사비기 랭이비 데부티 단단 나란 토라이 민기여라 삼성지 디기 카르사자비기 랭엠비기 아니 나멘 탐지 아니 디 토비기 도브쇼 삼성기 아니 삼로를 땅투바이나 셈레야 카르소다 슈그다마스나 진치니 아니 나차이나 총을 줘야지 망바이나 약을 줘야지 딘지기 아니 로드브지 징고라서 디스고다 간지 깽에 남케 까우도 남디 케케세 조디 아니 디 토비기 깽인 TV 토비기 아니 소소피기 로드브 치는 줘야지 상무단 송여라서
So when it says, whatever happiness or suffering befalls the body and mind, as was explained in the context of transforming adverse conditions into the path, we have covered before. The section is explaining how to take on adverse conditions and use them in our practice, taking them onto the path. So whatever occurs to us, we think that it is not impossible for that to encounter. It is very possible for adverse conditions to befall upon us, because we have been collecting, accumulating negative karma since time without beginning and up until now. And without having purified those negativities, adverse conditions are still encountered. And when adverse conditions are encountered, we encounter them in adverse situations, either physical or mental. So then when we look at the reaction that we have to these adverse conditions, some become utterly despondent, they become discouraged, the mind becomes unclear, the mind develops this gloomy state of mind. But if you know how to take on these adverse conditions onto the path, then you think about them. At the time in which you experience those adverse conditions, you think that this is a result of karma that I have accumulated, and I've been accumulating karma since time without beginning and up until now. So we can think then at that very time, may by this current experience, may I be able to overcome all ripening, all future ripening. So when you think about it in this manner, then you can reduce the painful reaction that you have to this situation. You can make it become lesser, but also you can also make great improvements for the future. This is what we call taking adverse conditions onto the path. So what it means is that when you encounter such adverse conditions, rather than succumbing to them and becoming despondent, you develop a great determination in your mind. Your mind becomes strong.
nimbo sodan de la son shebanes rang kelambi domba sumki sotar chansum sanga kita domba ingiri sumgi 제랑기 담식 남당 제자도 80일 노종의 담식 남 소당 되도 송을 차오스.
And then the next instruction says, God both at the course of your life. The pledged or natural commitments of the three vows you have taken, and in particular the commitments of mind training explained above, should be guarded even at the course of your life.
대당 안쪽에 배나 개니 그 동바 개solong 그 동바 찬주스미 동바 다 상가 그 동바라 아니 타도는 지 상가 그 추슈사지라고 하는 람상고 슈경 제자를 소고다 지 여러서라 이나야 아니 전당 엄마들 피게 아니 담식 디 칸다지 송토도 동바 칸다지 송도도 도졸아야 제바지야 마제니 근데 추 켈린 제자바이나 아니 게리 견치와 연구했다 라마 코모스 송대 디렌도스라 간지 담식 도마 마송바이나 아니 야기드야 파샤니 아니 만냐와게 규차로원자 저도 빼마서 계심부 송도 왔으라.
Here this section refers to the pledge on natural commitments of the three vows. So we have different vows that we take. For example, as a lay person, you might take a vow that is called the vow of approaching virtue, the lay vow. Or you might take ordination as a novice or as a fully ordained. You might take upon yourself the bodhisattva vow. It might even happen that you hear about a tantric empowerment being given, and you take upon yourself the mantra vow, the tantric vow. Sometimes we rush to do it. But without knowing what is it that we need to guard, what are the pledges that we have taken, what are the promises that we make, what are the things that we need to abstain from, what are the things that we need to guard, inevitably we incur faults with respect to our commitments. And without guarding the vows that we have taken, without guarding the pledges, the samaya that we have committed to, not only we will not make improvement, we will not have any progress, we will incur faults with respect to the trainings.
데레 pena re magi chubung Tsultrim ni chene ra domba xiaondi pi ngong ro de xiaondi xianla neba xedan cheba dombi ki dombas an dezo pe mase ba kishen wara da xianla neba xedan cheba domba di song goya kares di len goya kares ra di ro shimju cheba na xianla ya neba kari tangba ina ya di rebu dunghar di rangi nyong goya chegwanza din digumdos ngando dewa digugor dungan digumwanza dungan mundibige ke우치게 xianlan neba kaduyunita ani chirigumdos chebayna rana dungan jungdos tinza xianlan neba sheta cheba dombigi domba di mason pardo ani dungan yongyong barochi chaganza ani domba di dungar gobigi goba tobigi chet domba den shawa imbachi the sewu chagoras ra.
Sorry, so we will incur faults with respect to the vows and the trainings that we have. So, for example, in terms of the things that we got, the vows that we take, for example, we can adopt the mental attitude that, we can adopt the ethical discipline that it abstains from the 10 non-virtues. So the very nature of this vow, or of this abstention from the 10 non-virtues, is abstaining from harm, from harming others, and the basis of that harm. So that in order to take up this ethics in which we abstain from the 10 non-virtues, we need to be clear about why to take this vow, why do we take this vow, what is the nature of this vow, and so forth. And to answer it succinctly, if we harm others, the result of that would be being harmed ourselves. We will experience suffering, we will experience harm if we harm others. So all of us are seeking happiness and well-being. We want to be happy. We do not want to suffer. And for that reason, it is not right to harm others, because if we harm others, we end up experiencing unsought suffering, unsought harm. And therefore, we take up a vow. We develop this mode of abstention or restraint, in which we abstain from harming others as a basis of that harm, which means that at the end will lead to a cessation of suffering. And for that end, we take a vow.
데리딘자 당한도 신기요 말마더라 신이지 뭐나 아니 대번 되봤다 동원 문제비기 간사지기 동바 송고야디 가서다 무여로지 라 동바 마소나 니 동바 송고메 아니 갈 대와 고고였라와나 개와리스 갈 동가 고고메 아니 니 동바 송고메스라와나 개와리스 동가 고고메바타 대와 고고여바지바나 네버도 동바 송고야지 나미게이 니 동바 송고메세사미 아니 나지 넘버 맹이 동바 송고메 진지 랍사 싸우니 문도스 간선 랑기 샘라야 대와 동가 문데바디 아니 샘니 토르투고 메와이나 동바 마송 란송치 개지 동바 마송 왜나 동가 용용 바치 좀 더 디송고도 왔어라
Kabila dombase di krandendeji. Domba lansadende. In migechu pongwe Tsultrim di mixegi domba hoksa. Chizan domba dende mixe dendeji.
Je te chongna geni domba, yechu domba, chanju sembe domba. Ta lenggo da.
In krangi di kesi namba mai na dendeji.
Namba mai na nga namba chi mes la sa megyoroj. 가서 대원 되고요라. 동원 되고요 말아. 게디 약보지 아니 빠나 맞어도 아니 대와 약보지 종했다 내가 ditch당기 균제가 좀 받치 송도 왔어.
지선들라 Tsultrim 송고그래 네 domba 송고그래 슬람나 칼레카브로.
domba 송고그래스.
namba mai na.
송고그래네. 다시 송고요 말아. 디엔 네슬로가라다. 송고바다 마송이 네슬로가다. 마송와도 소소소 라마리. 나 고구여버디 피기 샘컴도 또니 고구여레스.
So we might not see that, we might not understand that, but we can still recognize that if we are wishing for happiness and for well-being, if we do not want to suffer, a person that is looking for happiness and does not want to suffer needs to guard this vow. Really, when you think about it in terms of reality, someone that is seeking happiness, well-being, someone that is wanting to avoid suffering needs to guard this vow. So if you think that I don't want to guard it, I don't need to guard it, but it's still seeking happiness, well, you have an kind of an inner contradiction in the way that you think. If you think that I wish for no suffering, but I don't want to guard this vow, well, you have again a contradiction here. Really, if you're seeking happiness and well-being, if you're wishing to avoid suffering, then this is a vow that you need to guard, to abstain from harming others, and the basis of that harm, to abstain from the 10 non-virtues. So you might be thinking, well, I'm not a monk, I'm not a nun, I'm just a layperson, so therefore I don't need to guard this vow. Or if you think that I'm not even Buddhist, because I'm not Buddhist, I don't need to guard it. Again, that doesn't work. Because if you are seeking happiness and well-being, if you don't want to avoid suffering, really, then this is something that you need to guard. This vow is something that you need to guard. This is at least what Geshe thinks.
제 가서나 난주기 저것도 비 동할 세발이야. 네버도 칼라스다 고그러 왔어. 그냥 칼라스마서 결혼을 하마리. 수강기 결혼 칼라 인지 마선 조금에 제 자원 증인데 요 말이야. 결혼 지금 그 동할 세발이야. 네버도 칼라스 고그러 왔어. 칼라 마세 버도 지금 그 동할 세투 말어 왔어.
So in Geshe's opinion, if you're seeking happiness and well-being, you want to avoid suffering, then you need to guard the vow. But then it's still your choice, kind of in terms of whether you're going to guard it or not guard it. Well, this is your own decision. But really, kind of, if this is what you're seeking, happiness and well-being, and wanting to avoid suffering, then inevitably this is what you need to do. In a way that is similar to, for example, suppose that you're hungry. If you're hungry, to dispel this pain of being hungry, you need to eat food. You need to do it, but still eating food or not eating food, this is completely up to you. It is your choice. But if you're wanting to avoid the suffering of being hungry, well, the only way that you can eliminate that pain is to eat food.
제 난주기 동할 디 동할 지슈디 로 샘그 동할 디 자와 칼투 거스람디 착다 몬송 때니 중구 여버티 야시 야단 바레스 딩원 트만트 자마레마다 다 딘디 착다 몬송 때비 동할 세바 제발이야 자와 착다 몬송 고고고 거레스 빵고 거레스 착다 몬송 뽕발이야 dombasum shil shachini jensam songchini ani gewi chulaya komdi te tim bashik toni chagdam mosum pongormada tili shembigi ani kabge mensa rag toni chagdam mosum ponsu chig mebainza ani mebainza dombasum gogres genzen deresro 다 디가 지금 동가 용나 용 대어 마용 나마용 갈치는 지가 송금에서라나 디 소소소 톱당레스로 데 딘디로지 송거다 디나 야지자다 위어레스로 이제 걔 너무 송는 뭐 초고 말다 라고 말다 이네 마소나 걔는 동가 용구 여버디 니무슈 치르줘야디 야지자레스 니무슈 치르줘바이나 걔는 타만디고 용야디 야지자다 버레스
So then, in terms of the suffering or pain that we experience, the one that we have on a mental level certainly is the strongest form of suffering that we experience. And this strong form of suffering arises and depends upon our afflictive states of mind, anger, attachment, and ignorance. Certainly 100% certain that the mental suffering that we experience comes in dependence upon anger, attachment, and ignorance, regardless of whether we understand that or not. So then, if we want to dispel our suffering, we have to rid ourselves of anger, attachment, and ignorance. If we want to dispel anger, attachment, and ignorance, we need to abandon them. And the abandonment of anger, attachment, and ignorance is based on setting up ethical discipline, guiding ethical discipline in which you know the limits of your behavior. You create a clear distinction between what you can do and what you cannot do. So that constitutes the basis of training in virtue that will culminate in the elimination, the abandonment of anger, attachment, and ignorance. There's no other way for doing that. So it's not that you can use certain substances, alcohol, get the needle or whatever in order to abandon your anger, attachment, and ignorance. What you need to do is, first of all, to base yourself in guiding ethical discipline in which you clearly know what your limits are in terms of what you can and what you cannot do, and use that as a basis for training in virtue. So you might be thinking that I don't want to do it. I don't want to take upon myself the vow. Why do I need to do it? Well, this is completely your own freedom to decide what you're going to do. Geshe is not saying that he's now going to force you to take this vow, that you are compelled to guard ethical discipline. This is really your choice. It is our choice. But still, if we think of what our goals are, what our wishes are, we want to be happy, we want to experience well-being, we want to avoid suffering. Well, if we do want those things, then we need to abide by ethical discipline. We need to guard it. And if we don't do so, well, inevitably we'll end up experiencing situations in which the suffering that we experience as a result of not abiding in ethical discipline could be very strong.
And the nangloya chetato harshibi lojong tamsignam sodan de sonja tikonya rang kelambi dombosumji cherangi tamsignam dans ani lojong tamsignam sodan de songore seti cherangi tamsig lengores dombal lemba zammaste dombi ki chensam ani sodan de songore seti solo songores landi pigi number chikbojile songyo mari ani kenjen namga pel korangi jinju chikbojile ya songyo mari anzo devan debata dunga mundeba samolola ya ro chona dishigore songorda tendichik mache bardo ani tarduk deva toyata dunga tamji tendu sebachi yontab zawani ni mebanza delaya damka roji zawani ni mebanza disungores ro.
So this section says the pledged or natural commitments of the 3 vows you have taken, in particular the commitments of mind training explained above, should be guarded even at the cost of your life. So we have pledges that we've made, they're called in Buddhist language samayas. We have taken vows. So we need to know what the limits are between what we can do and what we cannot do. And this applies not only to Buddhists, but Geshe reckons that it applies not only to students of Khenchen Namkapel, the author of this text, but Geshe reckons that it applies to everyone that is seeking happiness and well-being and wanting to avoid suffering. So until that happens, until we guard our pledges and natural commitments, until we not guard in a proper way the limits of our behavior, so long as until we set borders, we will still have basis for the experienced suffering. So in that sense, when we think of whether we have choice, freedom in that sense. Well, if we're seeking happiness and well-being, if we wanted to avoid suffering and pain, then this is what we need to do. We need to guard the pledges that we have made, and we also need to guard those natural commitments.
This song, the Kashila, the Domba song on the Kalakawa Shujari, the Yomarson, the Yungora, there's a DJ, the comment the Yungorda, Kawasun Labarcha said. Kalakawa Yorda, Malabran, Love Govers.
And so looking at the mode of progression of the text, someone might be thinking that, well, even though I need to do it, this is so difficult. I find it so difficult to guard it. So the next point says, training the three difficulties. In the first place, it is hard to remember the remedies for disturbing emotions. Still loimbe. In a shebane tambonyomon di loimbe. Okay.
Tilda, Chitang Ranganda, Mumbai Shaman Sombainza, Tsultrim Laya Malavni, and D. Nami Ra Ngansung Tundri Nela Soba, and it's Hidag Nela Soba, Nyavi Nela Soba, Kibigi, and Dungarki, Kaduti, Nanzutan the Tsurtu Meva, Shing Mevainza, and Tamsik Domba Sonyati, Kalakawushu, Chimbach Sorgoras, Pigi Namin di Chik Sorbaina, and Tamsik Domba Sony. Deya di kipu shuj chagwasara the kipu shuj ro tab devu shuj mitse na tab devu shuj ani kewa chima ina ya gaji trojen ani rocho ya kewa chimi kausi imba ina ya pe ani andin mitse di dili lawa chipena ani devu pak pepu ani tindi checho ya ji yungu yoba di tong tuba ina Domba the Lavi Chenson, Laviati, Gaji Trojingani, Juktuachi, Yunguyores, Mukivatamato, Yovati, Nelu Thomas, Tiras, Nanzun Jugmatuadi, Tinelu Tomato, Ani Kovi Yegun Tomato, Numutu Songi Yegun Manto, and the Chadam Mozam Bashi, Gishawan the Cubanza, Ani Chegoyat Chemashi, Mugoyatelia, and Ninsen Tusumlia, Ani.
So for us, and Geshe said that in saying that includes himself in that, we're still under the control of confusion, of ignorance. And if being under the control of confusion, of ignorance, if we do not guard our ethics, well, there will be suffering that we will experience in future states of existence, future rebirths. The three miserable states of rebirth, being born as an animal or as a preta, in the hellish state of existence. And currently, we don't sense the experience of suffering that exists in those states of existence. And also we don't understand those states of suffering in miserable states of existence, and therefore we find it hard to guard the samayas and the vows that we have taken. But if we understand the experiences of suffering in those miserable states of existence, it will be easy and simple for us to guard ethical discipline, and we will enjoy the guarding of ethical discipline. We do it with a happy state of mind, to the point in which when this life will come to an end and we will proceed to the next life, we will do that with a happy state of mind, and thinking that I've guarded as much as I could my ethical discipline in this life, so that I can abstain or avoid a miserable rebirth in my next lifetime. Next lifetime, my situation would be even better. I'll have a comfortable and spacious way of living. So if you think about it like that, then it makes the guarding of samayas and vows and ethical discipline, it makes it easy, makes it more simple. It makes it enjoyable. And this is how the past masters of the past have referred to that. So not understanding, for example, samsara and the false of samsara, we find it difficult to avoid that. Not understanding suffering, precisely, we find it difficult to abstain from what we need to abstain in order to avoid that. This is how they refer to it. So when we really can't see the result of not guarding ethical discipline, it is indeed very difficult. It is indeed, can be difficult to guard our vows and samaya, but if we understand the suffering that is entailed with not guarding ethical discipline, it is made much easier.
Dirida kanchi chölaya kazu lab tubayna ra di chögi ani mesiti kibu mesi kibu zamase ani kewa chimalaya ani dendrol kiya tuzu gasha jadamba yungu yosare sangudu chölaya ngoni chöl lamgin tuzu ta kazu siki ngamsun tong yore ra bena ani lama kewa tamba tuzu ani su jeba inaya ani pe 대구 당 조와 당 가와 쇼 용야디 아니 추를 납치니 추기 냠니 약부 예비기 툴때니 아니 미소다 가오다 데미치고라서 아니 작방 짠짠 토는 로딩 짐바나 가주 시기 비기라야 지 아니 규첸자 톱첸자 고사 여바이나야 단 눈라 테스트 아니 펠레도 싱이 용식을 먼저 오늘 잡니 아니 임묘징이지 수치여 말았어. 그래. 니고 쭉 돈이 개바디 쭉 냠는 돈이 레버를 먼저 제목하게 말았어.
So that comes from a Dhamma practice. If you practice the Dhamma, your mind will be made happier in this life, and also in your next lifetime. If you have practiced the Dhamma, you will attain a pleasant or a happy state of rebirth. Really, when you think of how these things happen or come to pass, you can see how through Dhamma practice, practicing virtue, those things come to pass. And we can see that also manifesting in the lamas, the great masters of the past. So there are those great lamas, great masters of the past, and some people have great faith in them, great devotion, always happy to see them or to encounter them. Well, those qualities in which people have great faith in you, great respect, great devotion, and so forth, that comes from those masters having practiced the Dhamma before. Whereas, a certain Lama might enjoy a high status, might be famous, might have possessions and so forth, but still, if they are controlled by anger, attachment, and so forth, it might be that people show tokens of respect to them in their presence, but then when not in their presence, people don't have much respect to them. They don't find them inspiring. Right? To find someone inspiring, to have great faith in that person, to have the great devotion and respect to that person, comes from them having practiced the Dhamma properly.
Dirda the chunyamni kandas chigorse diretani diza tanju kondu shivananshi ani kyavi kunjosum ani ngusim bitoni ani jamdun tsende ani lamdur ne shinji malogo tyongingi ani lamalaya tegu kanji laminenjur ro ani tsende toni da rangyu pigige da shudachiyati ro rangi gyuki nyumu toksomgi 아니 견 통고야 아니 뉴무 독성라야 인부 된 거야 디비기 짱만 맞아 봐도 견 튀는 줘야지 그 추억이 냠네 디렌도 왔어. 디치투바는 취치투오리. 디마도 취치마투겐도 레들도 왔어.
So then in terms of our practice, if you wonder how then do I put it into practice? Well, first of all, we recognize the objects of refuge, the 3 objects of refuge. It depends upon fully recognizing the objects of refuge. We can have a fully qualified going for refuge. We rely upon a spiritual teacher that teaches us unerringly what we need to do, what we need to take up, and what we need to cast aside. And we then work on our mind, we correct our mind, we fix our mind when we follow those instructions. We apply antidotes to our afflictive states of mind, to anger, attachment, and ignorance. And as we do so, it means that we're putting the Dharma into practice. We go through a process by which we develop our mind. We antidote our afflictive states of mind. We purify negativities and obscurations. We cultivate virtue. That is the meaning of our practice.
벤슨 루시원 당한도 망치겠다. 잡지 라마 소브르무지다 캥그러 왔어라. 라마 소브르무지네 ጽ뜻벤 라마 땡다. 아니 대버치딩 만보라. 콩 변나 총사들이나 좀이라 좀. 아니 좀기에 롱바 쿠교 쇼지. 파존 로고나 수수 도디케는 마도. 아니 변나 모타다 드스파샤니. 아니 따팅는 조사메디게 너무 딘디질이야. 아니 갑질라면 소거는 총다. 이내 단디질이야. 뭐 강강 드치야디. 최냠술 람발 때니 코널 때니 총샤워레마도 셴바 가야 말아 왔어.
So, for example, there are many that rely upon Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche. Just to give you an example, so many people rely upon Lama Sopa Rinpoche having great faith in him. So Kyabje Lama Sopa Rinpoche was born in Tsum. And Tsum is kind of, when Lama Sopa Rinpoche was born there, it was such a remote area, remote and underdeveloped area. So there were no kind of proper roads leading in and out. When you needed to go places, there were some places that were not even passable with mules, with horses and such. But still, someone that came from this remote area became a person that's a great number of people have such a deep faith in. Well, a person that comes from such a underdeveloped place and has so many followers, so many students, is a person that have practiced properly because of the proper, pure practice of Dhamma. They end up being such a source of inspiration for so many other people.
대자디는 같이 로그인 같이. 저거는 티는 딕서스라. 독바르나 이 라이프타임 돌려야 돼. 근데 아이나 삼성 이제 독바르 여바나. 저렇지. 대면은 셴바 독바카르나. 티는 딕서스.
Geshe is wondering if you have any questions about what Geshe said so far, either with respect to what he said so far or some other things. Any questions? If no questions, we can. So in the Mixima Verse, we said at the last line, Losam Drakpa Shabla Sowa. So Losam Drakpa, this name, is Losam Drakpa the teacher of Lama Tsongkhapa? Who is Losam Drakpa? Dila Losam Drakpa se dila Mixima dila Losam Drakpa Shabla Sowa Dev Sajwa. Losam Drakpa se di Jerimpoche ki Gegenre di Soinas. Yeah. So Losam Drakpa is the name of Lama Tsongkhapa himself. Yeah, Lam Tsongkhapa's actual name, you can say, was Losam Drakpa.
제르무치다 라미 조직 아니 지저renda와 딘자 지저renda와야 뜨버치 퓨 뜨버퓨디 단지 쇼나지 전면김비 홍보장비야 세메제비 대진치리스 도보만은 정지 상에다 간진 김비 수계renda와 쇼늘로 드셔로 소원데 탄데 보원다에 짱도서세 뜨버드 퓨 퓨벌 때니 아니 지저renda와기 뜨버디 ngala yogumundu tebadi kerala yogundu soncheni ani jonul orisivi sigdi tsablaya losan travasat ani gurbaris ro dindri tonda ani jerumuji laminenjo chawati dindri rendos ro.
So the story goes with respect to this 5-line Mixima verse. It was composed by Lama Tsongkhapa in relation to his teacher, Jetsun Rendawa. So he offered a verse of praise to Jetsun Rendawa, and the order of the lines was slightly different. So looking at this verse, first of all, in the original verse, it was Chimekembe Wampo Jampiliang, Manjushri, master of stainless wisdom, then Mimitsewa Techichen Rezek, Abalukdashfar, great treasure of non-objectifying compassion, then Lord of Secrets, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Dupu Malu Jomze Sangwedak. Then the fourth line was Kanchen Kebe Jetsun Rendawa, right? So Lama Tsongkhapa was saying Jetsun Rendawa, crown ornament of the sages of the land of snow, to Shunu Lodru, that was the name of Rendawa, Shunu Lodru. At your feet I make requests, please take care of me, me who is seeking liberation. So then Jetsun Rendawa, Lama Tsongkhapa's teacher, said that this is really not suited that someone like you would offer this verse to me. Actually, this verse should be offered to you. And therefore he made changes. Instead of his name, he inserted Tsongkhapa's name, and that became the famous Mixima verse.
There's that Gyunde saying, this song got the Gyunde in Rotan said, Yam Sembura. Gyupiki Sosa Drujan Kadulaya, Jangolama Tungava Chimbu, Rangi Savilama, Judun Rendavati, Rixum Gombu, Danye Du, and his Saltamni, Sondem Zevanza, T. Tulateni, and Javalo Santavan Tar, and Javar Rixum Gombi Molaya, Sangiadi, Gutindil Den Chongawach. Didn't was right.
It's quite special when you think about it in terms of causality. Causes produce effects. So when we think of Lama Tsongkhapa's life and how he engaged in the accumulation of the collections, purifying negativities and obscurations, in his personal practice, he considered Jetsun Rendawa, his teacher, to be someone that embodies the protectors of the 3 lineages. So the protector of the 3 lineages are Manjushri, for the lineage of wisdom, Avalokiteshvara, for the lineage of compassion, and Vajrapani, for the lineage of ability. So he considered his teacher, Jetsun Rendawa, to be the embodiment of the protectors of these 3 lineages. And in his practice, he thought about Rendawa in this way, visualized Rendawa in this way, supplicated Rendawa in this way. So he created those causes for the accumulation of the collections, purifying negativities and obscurations, the result of which Lama Tsongkhapa himself became a person that embodies a personification of these 3 lineages.
Jinju Samalog, Jerumuchi, Gomondi, Rizom Gombi, Danik, and me number change out, so they were going. Kanji Gut Samalo, and Jerumuchi, Rangitsavi Lamalaya, Sigdang Ton, Chonsha Embassy. Sivu Shujere, Tinza, Lamram Kandajimbayania, Rangitsavi Lamalaya, and Sanjita Gorisati, Nengarendos, Rangitsavi Lamalaya, Sanjita Tubano, Rani, and Sanji Ngolaya, and Chicken Gobo, and Sanji Toyagi, Tending Cabbage showing Guyasaris, and on the 2 Mevanza, and Sardiach. Geshe Saris.
So then when we think of how Lama Tsongkhapa himself became someone that embodies those protectors of the three lineages, and Lama Tsongkhapa had so many students that meditate on Lama Tsongkhapa as being such that in the recitation, in the prayers, in the way of thinking, consider Lama Tsongkhapa to be the embodiment of these three lineages, we can sense the importance of this element of practice. So this is also emphasized in the explanation of the steps of the path to enlightenment, which emphasizes the importance of seeing one's own root Lama as a Buddha. So if you adopt the mental attitude in which you see your own root teacher as Buddha, you expedite it so that you expedite your own attainment of enlightenment. Your own attainment of the state of Buddhahood is attained faster. And that's a really great point. That's a really important point to implement in one's own practice. So thank you. We will leave this session here for now. Dila online la chiwa chikdu tandal lena malena. Rinpoche said ne lome.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So there's before we do that, there's one question here from Victoria. It says, is it correct that recently Geshe made a comment about our inability to maintain a bodhicitta motivation for even an hour? If so, could Geshe please explain which types of practice he was referring to? Any suitable practice began with correct motivation, sustained for an hour, and then correctly dedicated, or more specific practice focused on bodhicitta or something else? And what degree of bodhicitta was he referring to? Dila nyama peshe disa pasan yamane tinguna gena sunshasa. Dila so chanchu gisen gowaina peshe chuzu chik goina pekale kaudus. So then peshe mambochi netugimare ketugimares. Tadila chuzu chik la chanchu gisen devaina nevaina dila mixegi nyamlen den dawo chik shegiwe siamane ngaso chuzu chik gongyawaina chik chewaina tambo kunun che ani jawa chik gewa chik tuk tamalangwa chik gyap di tambo langan so chanchu gisen kiene ani di chapsan chuzu chik gowaina de chuzu chik chanchu gisen gontan den dawo chik tsigirve siamana chuzu chik chanchugi sem dagala neba ina jila mixegi nyamlen chik sanlo chik na yorves
개추도 찍래 쳐다 체인베스 곰치.
So Geshe is wondering, Victoria, if you have tried to sustain an hour of meditation on bodhicitta. Have you tried it out?
그거라 쳐다 체 맞으니 걸어가고 열스라 되게 열다세.
Yeah, Geshe says that, you know, kasadi chik jama machana. Yeah. Yeah, because sometimes people don't, you know, sometimes people don't even meditate on bodhicitta for an hour and just kind of have that idea, the guess that if you do it for an hour, it's going to be really difficult.
이내야 토마 공원디게 아니 뒤즈 튼튼튼튼라야 삼다 바라샤 두 진 콤지 때문에 주고 먹가위 송 테레다 콤지 때문에 간점 찔러야 추주 찍디 룩스 드셔야지 라 디차가 왔다 콤지 맞대 봐이나 디 호트가 비게 아니 용야지 서들라나 서요 말았어 칼라 임바이나야 비게 호트가 루바이나 니반가리 시그러다 컴부 칸 스테이션 저기야거라.
Jokes aside, Geshe said that if you, as a beginning, when you start to practice bodhicitta, it's good to keep your sessions short, which means to meditate on bodhicitta for a short while and then to take a break, rather than extending long sessions, spending long sessions on meditating on bodhicitta from the very beginning, start with short sessions. And if you start with short sessions, and then you, as time goes by, you increase them, at some point, it would be easy to do even an hour meditation on bodhicitta, and it would appear to your mind as if the time passed just within a snap of a finger, just like that, time flies. So that's a useful approach to how we kind of develop those meditations to the point in which we can remain for longer time doing those meditations. Okay. So Geshe said that it is like eating your food moderately rather than kind of chucking all the food in one go to your, to your throat, risking being choked on your food. Then just kind of spoon feed yourself. All right, thank you very much. Let's do the dedications. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow, and may that which is arisen not diminish but increase more and more. Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain till samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings who makes extremely clear the path that is unification of emptiness and compassion. To the lotus holder Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. You uphold the submersible way, who serves an abundant bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Majjuna's victorious doctrine, who masterfully accomplish magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels, Savior of myself and others, your disciples. Please live long.